Hello everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Humble Choice bundle for October 2023. If you're looking for some scares this month, Humble Choice brings two, but only if you like the movie game variety. Nothing else really that spooky, but there are a few other good ones thrown into the mix. As always, let me know what you think of this month's bundle as well in the comments below. Be sure to check the timestamps for specific games, and stay tuned for my final thoughts in the end. Okay, let's get to the review. Starting off the bundle is Mr. Prepper, a survival crafting game where you take the role of the game's title character, Mr. Prepper. He's a conspiracy theorist nut who believes the government is out to get him, and in this particular instance, he's right. So, to subvert the government's control over him and the player, they'll need to build a self-sustaining underground bunker and develop a plan to escape this nightmarish authoritarian regime. As opposed to other games like it, Mr. Prepper takes an ant farm perspective where players see a side cut of their base and surrounding areas. Players need to gather resources through trade, foraging, or disassembling their own household items to get what they need to build their base. However, periodically, the government will send one of their agents to check on the player and determine if there's anything suspicious going on, like a secret underground bunker. Players need to cover their trail and make sure nothing is too suspicious in their house, like a lack of a particular item or too much of something. Having only had the one inspection, I'm unsure how challenging this aspect is, but I imagine it could make for some interesting gameplay of needing to restock your house just so that you appear to be a good, law-abiding, president-loving citizen. The gameplay seemed alright. I think there were some issues with it not responding to clicks I would make, but maybe that was me not clicking the right button. Either way, it didn't deter that much from my enjoyment. I wasn't in love with this game, but I could see it as being something I'd return to for a different change of pace from what I usually play. A Juggler's Tale is a short puzzle platformer. The game starts off with the storyteller putting on a puppet show about a circus performer named Abby. She dreams of escaping the circus, where she's mistreated, and exploring the world. She does manage to escape, and this tale is about her harrowing adventures of trying to keep her freedom. The gameplay is fairly simple. You can interact with some objects, which seem to be denoted with red, and you can throw some of the objects you pick up. However, I felt that it wasn't entirely clear what you could throw your objects at. So much of the colors of the world are muted, with interactable objects not really standing out. I was left scratching my head a couple of times with how I should proceed. I think the point of this was to make the player think about how to solve a puzzle, but it felt more frustrating than not. The use of the puppet string as an obstacle for the player to work around was a clever idea, but I can't say that the game really impressed me that much. Also, there was a moment where the game seemed like it froze and wouldn't move on to the next section, until it finally did after a few minutes. So just a warning if this happens to you. For me, I can't say that I'm too keen on playing this again, and would only do so because it's such a short game, clocking in at around 2 hours. Next is Lords and Villains, a survival colony builder. Obviously, comparisons are going to be made to RimWorld, and at a glance it's definitely similar. Players will collect resources, build homes and industries up in order to help their budding group of villagers prosper. The main noticeable difference in Lords and Villains is you control groups of families that specialize in different professions. As far as I could tell, you can't control people at an individual level. As a ruler of these people, you grant them land and resources to build up their dynasties in order to pay you taxes in the form of resources they gather, and presumably money later down the line. As one would expect with a game like this, it's really impossible to get a sense of it in just an hour. I was able to play through the first tutorial mission, and that was it. Granted, there were a couple times when I didn't know what to do. First, I didn't know where to place fishing rods, although that was my fault because I didn't read the text. But with planting grain, it seemed like the only way to meet my quest quota was waiting until my villagers harvested the fully grown stuff and planted a new batch. What is here seems pretty neat, and it should be a nice change for fans of this genre. Also, I really like the pixel art style they used. And from the restore page, the gameplay seems like it can get more complex with multiple families, various professions, various classes such as clergymen and nobility, and of course warfare. I'd like to return to this one to explore the gameplay some more just to see how well it captures the medieval society idea. Spirit of the Island is a life sim game similar to that of Stardew Valley. The usual suspects are all here: farming, mining, fishing, building up your plot of land. There's also combat, some survival crafting elements, and the ability to attract tourists. Players start by making landfall on an island where they inherited their plot of land from their parents. You then follow one of the most annoying tutorials that I played in a while. Pop-ups assail you constantly, breaking you out of the game. I wish that games could come up with a better way of relaying information, but the developers here decided they wanted to teach everything to the player, just in case they never picked up a game like this before. Which is appreciated, I suppose, but also infuriating. The game that's here seems to be fairly solid, although I'm not the biggest fan of the survival elements, which consist of needing to fill hunger, thirst, and sleep meters. I've always felt these things tend to get in the way rather than add any interesting or immersive elements to gameplay. The starting island does a lot to introduce the player to the different aspects of the game, but I'm much more interested in exploring the other islands, which I wasn't able to do. Apparently later on there's the ability to help the small archipelago's economy by establishing businesses. This not only improves the island's well-being, but also helps fund more expensive expeditions to other islands, which sounds intriguing. Obviously I didn't manage to experience any of these things myself, so I only have the Steam page to pique my interest. I have a feeling I'll definitely be back to this one at some point, but the survival meters really drag down this experience for me, that I probably will be firing up one of my many other similar-like games I have in my library before this one. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, but this game also has 2-player co-op, which might be a deciding factor for some. Next we have Rebel Inc. Escalation, from the creators of the mega-popular Plague Inc. Evolved. Here we take the role of a counterinsurgency operation tasked with setting up and funding reforms for the people, while also making sure to stem insurgent groups trying to destabilize the nascent government. Players have to do this by spending their money wisely on appropriate reforms, because more stable areas will make it harder for insurgents to penetrate. However, if you don't deal with these pesky rebel groups, then it will lower your reputation. The goal of the game is to reach 100% stability in the region, while making sure your reputation doesn't drop to 0. This is much easier said than done, since the insurgents, once defeated in a sector, will constantly retreat to begin the process all over again unless you could trap them in. I'll be honest, when I first saw this game years ago, the premise of it didn't sound nearly as exciting as developing a super virus that can all of a sudden end humanity overnight. However, after playing Rebel Inc., I now see the appeal. This was a ton of fun trying to balance civilian reforms, along with putting out constant fires from corruption within the government to the actual people shooting and killing their way through my country. Playing on easy with my first go-around of it was obviously just that, easy. But bumping up the difficulty to normal, and I found myself making a lot harder choices. Okay, maybe I will give NGOs full reign of introducing new projects for my people, despite the inflation and corruption this will bring. And yeah, no. I'm gonna have to extend your deployment time another couple of tours, because I need boots on the ground here, even though that will tank my reputation. This constant balancing act was done really well. Without a doubt, I'll be coming back to Rebel Inc. in the near future. Here we have the first spooky game for October being the Dark Pictures anthology House of Ashes. I think anyone who's been subscribed to Humble Choice for a while now won't find this being any surprise, seeing as how we have the first 2 in the anthology already. For those who don't know though, House of Ashes, like its previous entries, is a blend of cinematic experience with light gameplay and choices. The gameplay is largely what I find the most lacking with these games, and is a big reason why I don't tend to gravitate to them. Most of the interesting points in the gameplay come from the decisions that need to be made for what a character does, or how they respond in a dialogue, as this can affect what happens to themselves or others in the story. When the game does relinquish more control, you're wandering around a small area and interacting with objects, spinning them around like a crazy person, and usually most of them are pointless. Or at least that's what it seems to me from a newcomer to each tale. Any other gameplay is either quick-time events in tense situations, where if you fail, well, you're probably gonna have a bad time. However, I will admit the story here was fairly interesting. It starts with a prologue set in ancient Mesopotamia, with some creatures being unleashed on this temple. The setup reminded me a bit of The Mummy. Brendan Fraser's Mummy, that is, not the Tom Cruise one. Then it fast forwards to 2003 during the Iraq War. It's supposed to be an underground bunker that intelligence has found, and a bunch of soldiers are sent to uncover it. Haven't gotten that far yet where they discover it, but you can bet it's probably the remains of this ancient Akkadian temple, and trouble will soon ensue. I'm not the biggest fan of this style of game, but I could see myself coming back for the story. Sliding into the penultimate slot is Metal Hellsinger, a rhythm-based FPS. You play as Unknown, one of Hell's denizens searching for a voice, and to do so she needs to fight through hordes of the damned. This is all done through an arsenal of weapons, all firing, or slashing, to the beat of an excellent metal soundtrack. Playing this game, I was immediately reminded of BPM, or bullets per minute, which has a similar style of play. Metal Hellsinger doesn't have roguelike dungeons, but the essential gameplay is the same. Stay on beat with your attacks to deal more damage and get more points by the end of a run. It sounds simple enough, but it's actually pretty challenging. For me, anyway. I feel like I'm pretty terrible at staying on beat, and that's more apparent in this game, where the vocals don't start playing until you have a times 16 modifier. So the vocals went in and out a lot for me since I kept flubbing my shots, which was a bit jarring. Despite this challenge, I still had fun with it. I think knowing what I was getting into really helped. In Metal Hellsinger, you start the run by choosing your loadout and then beginning the level. You could also play the level with different challenges that increase the difficulty of a session. Each level beaten unlocks the next with more guns, enemies, and songs. In a game where the music is a primary element, I think they nailed it here. Although, if you're not a fan of metal, then this one might not be for you. I didn't expect to say this going into the game, but I definitely want to come back to it and play some more. Finally, we have the Quarry, which is like a Dark Pictures anthology game, but without the Dark Pictures anthology heading the title. The gameplay is much the same here, much to my chagrin. I guess you don't have to worry about spinning objects around though, so that's nice. But much of the Dark Pictures anthology DNA exists here as well. You interact with objects that act as clues and evidence, which reveals some more about the story. According to a tutorial video, it was mentioned that evidence can be used to prove innocence, so that could be interesting. Outside of that, there is some light exploration, but it's as mentioned before. It's a small area where you interact with different kinds of objects and maybe talk to some other characters. The main draw here will be the excellent cinematic experience and the choices made along the way that change the outcome. The cast here is pretty good, and I actually recognize a number of them, which is pretty surprising for me. Actually, I found it oddly coincidental that both movie games this month starred a supporting actress from The Suite Life of Zack and Cody. Doesn't mean anything, but I thought I'd point it out. Anyway, bottom line, the acting is good in this game as well. Overall, once again, I thought the story intrigued me. I want to know what the heck is going on with this camp. Even in the bit that I played, there seemed to be 2 or 3 thread points as to what could be going on, leaving things appropriately mysterious. I guess the only thing for sure is that nothing good is going to happen to these young camp counselors. Obviously, I'd like to continue playing this to find out, but I'm not quite sure when I'll get around to it. Okay, let's wrap this up and see if this bundle was worth it or not. I based my rating solely on whether I thought the game was worth playing on about an hour or so of hands-on gameplay. Also, I'd be grateful if you could please give the video a like if you're enjoying it, because that really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm gods. Overall, this is an okay month. As I said in the start, it's great for those who are fans of the movie-style horror games. For all others, I think it's going to be a real mixed bag, and is probably only going to grab people who are fans of a specific game's respective genre. Also, I know it was never going to happen, but I really wanted to see Amnesia the Bunker pop up this month. But, oh well, maybe next October. Getting into the recommendations, we'll start with the must-plays of this month, and for me, that's Rebel Inc. Escalation. It might seem surprising to some, but Rebel Inc. was genuinely the game I enjoyed the most playing out of the bunch. I liked the frantic juggling of different things, and the constant fire ousting I needed to do in order to bring stability, or not, to a country. Although, even though that's in my must-play, the headliners all make it into my strong recommendations, being The Quarry, the Dark Pictures anthology House of Ashes, and Metal Hellsinger. The Quarry was a seemingly typical young people in the woods kind of horror trope, but I'm eager to see if it does anything different. House of Ashes has a unique setting and an intriguing backstory that makes me interested in learning more. Both of these games excel with an excellent cinematic presentation and acting, However, both also fall short for what I constitute as good gameplay, but I don't think that's enough to not bother with them. Unless you're not a fan of horror, that is. And lastly, I place Metal Hellsinger here. The soundtrack is awesome, and the gameplay is challenging, but rewarding. I'm sure if I continue at it, then I can get better at keeping the beat. In my week recommendations this month are Spirit of the Island, Lords and Villains, and Mr. Prepper. Spirit of the Island seems like it has the strong foundations of a typical life/farming sim, but I really dislike some of the survival mechanics they incorporated, namely the various meters that need to be constantly topped off. Lords and Villains seem like a fun medieval RimWorld clone with some slight differences. Unsure how well it really sets itself apart since I'm not overly educated with the genre. Mr. Prepper also has a solid foundation for a survival crafting game. The element of the government checking in on the player could make it a bit more interesting than merely surviving and building out your base. And unfortunately, I have one to place in the Don't Bother With section, being A Juggler's Tale. While I understand it's supposed to be a puzzle game and there should be a certain amount of time spent on figuring out the puzzle, I didn't think the game was forthcoming enough with what could and could not be interacted with, making it much more frustrating than what it needed to be. And that wraps up my thoughts on this month's bundle. Seems like we're in a little bit of a slump with Humble Choice, but maybe next month we'll smash it out of the park. Do you agree with my thoughts? What games, if any, are you looking forward to playing? Let me know what your thoughts are, if there are any different recommendations you'd make in the comments below. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.